Well, episode 3, and already the first retraction. I didn't think it could be done. I did not think that a president, by White House policy alone, could create obstacles to immigration so daunting that the peoples of Central and South America would just lose interest, or at least lose hope that they could make it into the United States if they made the journey. Donald Trump has had one term in office already. He campaigned on being tough on the border. He never stopped promising to restrict immigration. And yet his first term saw, seemingly no matter what he did, these drops and spikes in arrivals at the border, these border encounters. Immigration tapering off, then surging again, right up until this final spike in border encounters in the final months of his term. After the COVID lockdowns were lifted around April of 2020, this spike here, which of course continued to grow after Joe Biden took office. Now, when I looked at that data, I figured that if even the most vocal anti-immigration president could not slow down the surges in migration toward the United States, then nobody could. But new data is in, folks. Border encounters have dropped and hit the floor. Here at Freeplain, with new data comes new conclusions. The number of folks trying to cross the U.S. border is lower than anything we've seen since the lockdowns of COVID-19, and I see nothing to explain it other than White House policy. Turns out a president can, all by himself, turn the United States government so hostile to migrants that they just stop showing up. So, why now? It turns out that Donald Trump came into his second term with a lot of his old tactics locked and loaded, but with a few new ones as well. One tactic we've seen before is ordering U.S. military personnel to the border to reinforce the border patrol there. We saw that once already from Donald Trump in 2018.
The threat is real.
Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said Wednesday guard members will be sent to the border soon.
The Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security work together with our governors to deploy the National Guard to our southwest border to assist the Border Patrol.
But this deployment obviously wasn't enough to stop the migrant surge of 2019. Biden sent troops to the border as well in May of 2023.
As some of you may be aware, the Department of Defense released a statement earlier today regarding support to the Department of Homeland Security, which I'll reiterate here from the podium. At the request of the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Austin approved a temporary Department of Defense increase of an additional 1,500 military personnel to supplement U.S. Customs and Border Protection efforts on the U.S. southwest border.
Trump has sent additional troops to the border in his second term as well, but this tactic isn't new. So why the new result? Well, there are soldiers on the other side of the border as well. Both the Biden administration and both Trump administrations have made a big show of getting the Mexican government to cooperate and intercept migrants on their way through Mexico, on their way to the United States. Trump celebrated cooperation in 2019. The Biden administration announced a similar surge in efforts by Mexico to slow down migration in April of 2021. And finally, Trump announced within the first few days of his second term that Mexico had agreed to yet another surge in efforts to slow migration.
I had a great talk with Mexico, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not, and we have to stop the illegal aliens from coming in. I think we've lost 200,000 people on average a year for many years, much higher than the 100,000, could be even closer to 300,000. And they've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border.
So, what impact has the Mexican government had? Can Mexican enforcement account for the drop in border encounters at our border? Well, let's take a look at the Mexican government's reports of migrant encounters in their country. Here, I'm relying on Google translations to help me navigate the web pages of the Mexican government, but the data is out there. And, looky, we have spreadsheet format. Oh no, it's Spanish. How will we figure out what these 12 columns, oh wait, Mayo, Abril, Junio, Julio, Agosto, September. Those are the months of the year. Let's look at the total general, which I'm guessing means general total. Migrant activity in Mexico has plummeted as well during Trump's second term. They're not seeing migrants either. So there's no big surge of migrants being turned away or detained on their way through Mexico. They just haven't encountered many. It would appear then that migrants are being deterred from making it even as far north as Mexico. So if soldiers aren't stopping the migrants, how do we explain this quiet at the border? In March of 2025, President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. This law activates when a foreign nation or government threatens the United States. Once activated, the law allows the president to deport male aliens belonging to that foreign nation or government. The law was amended in 1918 to include female aliens. Today, the question of whether or not cartels and gangs count as a foreign nation or government is highly arguable. And so, of course, President Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act this year is being challenged in the courts. But this has not stopped the Trump administration from loading hundreds of aliens onto jetliners and flying them into the custody of El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, which has put these migrants into a supermax called the Center for Confinement of Terrorists, aka CCOT. Here's the Secretary of Homeland Security visiting CCOT. A couple of the guys put on the plane to the El Salvadorian CCOT Supermax have gained some public attention. One of them is André Hernandez Romero, an openly gay hairdresser / makeup artist / actor. According to his friends and family, André has been on a pillar of his hometown's annual Three Kings Festival since he was a child, designing costumes and acting on stage. His family says that before the Trump administration shut down the CBP-1 app, André used the app to schedule an appointment at the San Ysidro port of entry to apply for asylum on the grounds that being openly gay in Venezuela was dangerous for him. His family went on to say that André has no criminal record in any country and that he was housed by the Department of Homeland Security for several months until Trump took office, after which André was loaded on a plane and flown to the El Salvadorian Supermax. Here are a few photos snapped by a photographer who was there upon André's arrival. I haven't found any official copies of DHS documents to explain how André's case got so grim so fast. But NBC's David Noriega reports one theory is that André's tattoos link him to a brutal, notorious, murderous gang called Tren de Aragua. We see André has tattoos featuring mostly flowers, with one butterfly, one snake, and the words Mom and Dad with 2 crowns. I'm hearing rumors that members of Tren de Aragua like to use crown imagery, but I have not been able to confirm this. Meanwhile, here's a statement about André from Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, Tricia McLaughlin. She says it's not just his tattoos. She insists André revealed somewhere on his social media that he's a member of Tren de Aragua. Since McLaughlin's statement, an army of reporters have been scrambling to be the first to find this big reveal, but all have come up empty. Perhaps you may have heard of another man the Trump administration has flown to the El Salvadorian Supermax, Gilmar Garcia, another non-citizen with no criminal record in any country. An immigration court had specifically ruled in 2019 that Garcia was not to be deported until further notice. After Garcia's plane took off, bound for El Salvador, a second court order issued instructing the Department of Homeland Security to turn that plane around and bring the occupants back to the United States. Now, the Trump administration paid no more mind to the second order than it did to the first one. After Garcia landed and arrived in El Salvador, he was visited by a United States senator in El Salvador. Media reports indicate that the El Salvadorian government moved Garcia a little bit later to a lower security prison, which surprised me because El Salvador's President Bukele has publicly called Garcia a terrorist and a member of the notorious MS-13 gang. Bukele posted on X this photo here from when that senator came to visit Garcia. Zooming in, we can see that Garcia has some tattoos as well. Now, some folks are saying that the tattoos on his knuckles are code for MS-13, MS-13. Like maybe there are some other MS-13 members out there who have the same symbols on their hands, but I was not able to find an example. I did find one experienced law enforcement officer, Terrence Cole, who thinks these tattoos are a code for MS-13. But Cole made this statement literally while accepting a big promotion from President Trump to be the new head of the DEA. And folks, we cannot rely on any president's administrative officers for analysis on political controversies, or at least we don't do that here on Freeplain. Now, President Trump, for one, believes that there's no question that these tattoos on Garcia's knuckles indicate his membership in MS-13. He posted this on Truth Social in April. You can see he is holding up an exhibit to help us crack the code of these tattoo symbols. Some immigrants are living in the United States under something called TPS, Temporary Protected Status. Now, if you're an immigrant, TPS has less to do with you and more to do with your country of origin. If your home country is going through some sort of catastrophe or crisis, the DHS has the authority to label it as a TPS country for a certain amount of time. On February 5th, 2025, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem shortened the expiration date on TPS for certain Venezuelans, with the new expiration date being April 7th. So the TPS holding Venezuelans had about 2 months before their time runs out. A month later, in March, a federal court ordered that the TPS remain unexpired until further notice, until May 19th, 2025, when the Supreme Court sided with the Trump administration, and about 350,000 TPS-holding Venezuelan migrants living in the United States instantly became illegal aliens subject to seizure and deportation for overstaying their welcome. There's another program called humanitarian parole, by which an individual migrant will be allowed to stay in the United States for a specific reason, for a specific amount of time. Parole is granted individually on a case-by-case basis. It's temporary like TPS, so when it expires, that's it, you're expected to leave. On March 25th, 2025, the DHS Secretary announced that paroles that had been granted for about 500,000 migrants living in the United States were now revoked, and they had to leave immediately. A couple weeks later, a federal court put this on hold, but a couple of weeks after that, on May 30th, 2025, the Supreme Court again sided with the Trump administration, and about 500,000 parolees instantly became illegal aliens. I'm betting June of 2025 is going to be a pretty big month for deportations. So, where does this leave us? I'd say that with the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, with multiple people with no criminal convictions being whisked away to an El Salvadorian supermax, either with no court hearing or with a court hearing but with no regard to the court's orders. That right there is enough to make a lot of folks change their minds about migrating to the United States. Add to that 850,000 people who thought they'd made it to the United States with TPS or parole that they were told was good for months or for years into the future, suddenly waking up to discover that is all gone, and all 850,000 of them are now fugitives. It's beginning to make sense, I think, why the peoples of the world might be keeping their distance from the United States. The due process issue is something that we should all be concerned about. Let's take a look at the due process clause. It's not long. It basically says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So, did the founders put that into the Bill of Rights just so Americans could get away with crime or something? Like, I'm an American, can't catch me, due process, suckers. No, I think pretty much, if you're watching this, then you already know that the Due Process Clause was a response to thousands of years of kings and emperors basically deciding on what's what, or appointing their friends or family to be a magistrate or sheriff or some other lord who gets to decide who walks free and who gets thrown in a cage or banished from the kingdom. The founders were sick of that crap, folks. Have you heard of a public and speedy trial? Why do I want my trial to be public? I'm a criminal. How embarrassing. Or why do I want it to be speedy, especially in a time when so many crimes were punishable by death? Wouldn't I want my trial delayed? And the answer, of course, is that sometimes the local magistrate, the local sheriff, the local lord did not, in fact, have a good reason to imprison you. And so he just arrests you anyway and set your trial for a year from now. You'd be acquitted, but that's okay. By the time you're released from jail, you'd have learned your lesson, God save the king, right? Or maybe you wouldn't be acquitted. Maybe you'd be convicted and no one would know why, because the trial was held in secret and the public wasn't allowed in. But if we agree on nothing else, it must be that there has to be a trial of some kind. It can't just be the executive officer who decides whether or not I have a right to be in the country. We cannot leave it to just one person who gets to decide if my passport is legitimate or is a forgery, or my visa, or my social security card, or my birth certificate. Should we be leaving that into the power of one person, or even two? If we had two people, two officers have to agree. Does that fix it? Could it be that there just is no substitute for a pre-scheduled hearing in a courtroom where all parties are notified that it's going to happen, notified so that they can attend? There are seats in the audience for the public to attend. There's microphones. There's a stenographer or court reporter taking notes, and a court file, a public record with evidence in it. Which do you prefer? And how pleased should we be that no one seems to want to come to the United States anymore? What do you think?